Welcome back. Well, China has set out a 4-point list of actions Australia must take on board to get the country's relationship back on track. China's Foreign Minister Wang blamed the coalition for the bilateral breakdown in the relationship between Canberra and Beijing. He said Australia views China as a rival and a threat, and that was irresponsible. And those words led to the collapse of the relationship. Joining me live now is the Nationals leader, David Littleproud. Wang says it. Do we have to take some of his words to heart and reflect on that? What do you think?
Look, this is a bit of Chinese propaganda. The fact that the coalition government stood up to a bully. You don't throw your weight around the global community telling other countries what to do, giving 14 lists of demands that a sovereign country must undertake, otherwise they don't trade with you. And the coercive economic impacts that they put on our economies here in Australia, our industries, is something that the Chinese government should reflect on. We stood up to them and said we're not going to cop that. We're happy to have dialogue, but it's not giving demands. That's not how you throw your weight around the international community. You should be collaborative. You shouldn't have any demands. This should be about having open dialogue, respectful dialogue, respecting one another's sovereignty and making sure that they're protecting that sovereignty, and that's what we did as a government. And I think this new government has made it clear that they're going to continue on that path. I don't think it's constructive that you should list out another 4 demands that you want a sovereign country to undertake for them to have a relationship. It should be predicated on respect, not demands.
Well, I'm a bit confused about the demands now. There was 14 when you were in government. Now there's another 4. I don't know whether the list has got shorter or longer. How do you read that?
Yeah, well, that's where it's a little bit of Chinese propaganda more than actual clarity of understanding of what that respectful relationship must look like. But I think the government has been very clear from the start in their deliberations on this, is that the first action China must take is to remove those coercive economic impacts that they put on our economy. And that's the first thing they should do. And that would be the most respectful thing that they could do, is understanding that it's had a significant impact. But we found other markets despite that.
Yeah.
But to put another 4 demands and translating that can be tricky. And I think it's important that we don't come with demands, we come with respect. A respect of each other's sovereignty and understanding the protection of that is paramount to each of our countries. And we do that in a peaceful way, looking for a peaceful region as well.
Hindsight is a beautiful thing, of course, Mr. Littleproud. And look at countries like the UK. It has credited Australia and the Morrison government for really shining a light on China and alerting the world to the risks, if you like. But could things have been a little less shouty?
No, I mean, you've got to understand, we're at the coalface of this. We're at the bottom end of the planet, closer to China than what the UK and the rest of the world was. So we had more at risk than the rest of the global community did. So what we had to do is ensure that we showed a leadership role. What we were also able to do was prove that we could lead with the world and put in place an AUKUS agreement that generations will come, will look back on and know that that's protected our sovereignties, the liberties and freedoms that we enjoy now or enjoy in the future, because we've worked as a global community. But sometimes you've got to take the tough decisions. And despite that, we've continued to trade with China, but we've also found other markets as well. So, I think there's lessons in this around market diversification. But you just can't trade away your values and principles. There's been over 100,000 Australians have lost their lives defending that. And you don't just give that up. It's important that we stand our ground, because what we do now will determine those liberties and freedoms we get to enjoy and our generations enjoy in the next 5, 10, 20, 50, 60 and 100 years ahead of us.
All that said, the Solomons deal still happened under your nose. Today we read that the Solomons are stopping Australian aid workers there and Chinese advisors are being let in. How serious is that?
Well, obviously it is serious, and we're one of a number of Pacific nations that are trying to work with the Solomon Islands to get them to appreciate the risks that they are opening themselves up to. We're not the sole country doing this. Their Pacific family is also stepping this up, making it clear to them that there is real and present dangers of what they're trying to do. And the Prime Minister there needs to heed some of that advice, not just from Australia, but from all the Pacific nations and New Zealand as well. And I think that's important that we continue to try and have that dialogue. I congratulate the government on continuing to try and keep that open. but there's a Prime Minister there that has a strident view, and obviously we respect their sovereignty, but we're asking them to work with their Pacific family in understanding the risks that they're not just opening them up to, but other Pacific nations as well. We need to act as a Pacific family and as a Pacific community in understanding the threats.
Yeah, as I look out on gloomy Sydney today, David Littleproud, I know it must be far worse for farmers right up and down the East Coast. Just how tough are they doing it at the moment?
Yeah, look, it's been one thing after another. We had drought, then we actually finally got some rain, and then we had too much of it. And so this is going to have some real impacts. It's going to take probably another 6 months for those production cycles to get back up and going. Sadly, there's not a lot of confidence in getting those production cycles up. We're hearing from industry groups that farmers are only planning around 65% of their capacity because they're worried they don't have the labour to be able to get them off. And so they're not going to make the capital investment of planting those crops. So there's some real challenges, and I think what Australians need to understand is they're going to continue to pay for this at the checkout. They're going to continue to pay for this at the checkout, not because of the natural disasters just now, but because the government isn't providing our farmers with the labour force that they need. They're prepared to expedite visas for the construction industry, for healthcare, for hospitality, but they don't think that there's a skill shortage in agriculture at the moment. And every time you go to that checkout, you should see the Australian Labor Party on the top of that docket when you pay, because farmers are making investment decisions now. They've had a rough go with the weather, but they simply don't have the confidence, even with moisture in the ground, to plant and grow anything for you. So your supply is going down and your price is going up. So
what do you blame Labor for? What are we paying the labour tax at the checkout
for? They've taken away the ag visa. They're saying to Australian farmers all they've got availability of is a Pacific scheme. The Pacific scheme's already brought in tens of thousands, but it's not enough. We're sharing that with the rest of the industry.
Where should it be expanded to?
Well, we already had opened up Vietnam, and we were negotiating with Indonesia and other countries to open it up, because it's not just unskilled workers, it's also skilled and semi-skilled. And so the Labor Party doesn't seem to understand that agriculture needs skilled workers, not just in paddocks, but in abattoirs. And so there's abattoirs that are working only at 60-odd% capacity because they can't get people to go and work for it. So you're actually seeing meat prices going up because the supply is down. And when supply is down, prices go up. And if you take away that workforce availability, which is what the Labor Party has done, ultimately everybody pays. You're paying at the checkout. And that's why you should see their face on your docket every time you pay, because they are making an environment where farmers and processing sectors are making investment decisions not to undertake any work because they simply cannot put the bodies in there. And those bodies can't come from Australia. That we need them from overseas to come in. We put the structure of the environment there with an ag visa, and it got ripped away because their political masters, the AWU, said, no, you can't have them.
So where should it be expanded to? I mean, if you were looking at other markets like Vietnam, why not just open? It's desperate. I've heard from some of these harvesters as well, these ag workers. You've proposed that pensioners be able to work more. There's been no progress on that. What could you have done? What should you have done before the election?
Well, we had the ag visa. It started in October last year. The AW went and saw ambassadors from the countries of negotiating
and told them. Do you admit that it's always been so slow? Well, these things are caught up in the department for months.
No, but no, with respect, it wasn't. It was tied up with these sovereign countries about making a determination whether they want to sign up. And when an Australian organisation walks into an embassy in Canberra and talks to an ambassador and tells them, do not send your citizens to this country to work on Australian agricultural farming families' properties because they will exploit them, then any sovereign country would actually go and want to actually understand the risks of which they're sending their citizens over to. But let me ask you this, Laura. What organisation, Australian organisation, would do that to their fellow Australians? Who would go out and demonise Australian farming families to ambassadors, to trash their reputation, to trash our reputation? And for what? And I don't know why the AWU's got something against farmers. There has been a small cohort that's done the wrong thing. But I'm sure the AWU represent other industries where there's been workers, there's been employers that have done the wrong thing as well. But you weed them out. You don't go and demonise and actually try and destroy their reputation internationally. So these countries took time to decide where they wanted. Vietnam wanted to sign up in the end. We signed an MOU with them. And so This government needs to say where they're going to honour that, but then get back to the negotiating table with these other countries to give them confidence that we're going to look after their citizens. And we're going to look after their citizens because we increased the penalties, we increased the regulations, we made sure that there was translation in country about their rights. But the ag visa was also about pathway to permanent residency, about bringing the next generation of migrants to come and settle in Australia, to live in regional Australia, grow regional Australia, and to actually be here and be part of our community rather than rely on transient agricultural workforce. This was a structural shift, but the Labor Party's thrown it out because the AWU spent months talking to ambassadors. Ambassadors told that to me personally, and Dan Walton from the AWU has even parroted that out in the media about how proud he is and how he'll continue to do it. That's disgraceful. Who does that to their fellow Australian?
All right, we'll see if we can get Dan Walton on at some stage. David Littleproud, always good to talk to you. An issue that's not going away.
Thanks, Laura.